great week. So these are great days for the objectivist community. Ocon is going on. We are in an objectivist nirvana, too much good content, happy feelings, great announcements. Go catch up on YouTube yesterday's Tal talk about the state of ARI and his exciting announcement about Ayn Rand University. But today, and while Ocon is on a lunch break, we are also taking a break from this beautiful atmosphere, and we go back to the mundane, to the usual stuff of trying to throw some point of view influenced by, hopefully, by how we understand objectivism on what is happening in the world. And today we're going to talk about Australia. So you've probably seen in the news various incidents of what we'd call an authoritarian state getting too much, too extreme, even for what we've gotten used to with COVID. So we've seen things such as Australia imposing curfews, making sure that you don't go beyond 5 kilometers from your house and things like that. And we're going to discuss all this with Mark. And instead of just saying, well, these people are crazy, we're going to start with the facts. So we're trying to give the not to give the benefit of the doubt, try to see what do these central planners have in mind. And then we're going to try to see, A, whether it quote works, B, what are we to make of it. So we're going to focus on Australia and New Zealand. Why is that? Because they have been celebrated as success stories, that they did what everyone had to do. They had the courage to take the measures that we didn't have the courage to make, and therefore they have gotten away from the worst aspects of COVID. So if we see, for example, daily cases, we see Australia today is somewhere around 1,000 cases per day. Now, to put this into perspective, Greece, which has half the population of Australia, has more than 3,000 cases. So Greece has half the population, 3 times the cases. So you'd say, yay for Australia. Or New Zealand, half the population of Greece, only 64 cases. So again, you would say, that's unbelievable. What are they doing right? Or when it comes to death, Australia had something like 1,000 deaths. New Zealand had only 26 deaths, not 26,000, 26 deaths. And Greece, again, a country of around 10 million, half of Australia, double of New Zealand, 13,000 deaths. Greece with one of the strictest lockdowns in Europe. And to put this also in reference, Sweden, without a lockdown, without a strict lockdown, 14,000 deaths. So those who are in favor of strict measures would say, look, New Zealand with strict measures, strict travel restrictions, and imposing lockdowns the minute there is literally one case. So their last lockdown was when they found the first case of the Delta variant, has only 26 deaths from COVID. Sweden, with double the population, 14,000 deaths due from COVID. Therefore, checkmate people who complain all the time about our infringement of quote rights. It's all about saving lives, and tough measures work. Mark, is there any answer to that?
One of the things that Thomas Sowell says that I think is pretty deep with respect to questioning anything on the left is that you should ask in comparison to what and at what cost. The second one is the most important to me when discussing these draconian lockdowns. At what cost? And oftentimes the costs are hidden. They're invisible to us because they're potentials that are never realized. But I think that question is not being asked in the face of the concrete evidence that's in front of them. So at what cost? At the cost of liberty. At what cost? At the cost of the economy and the lives, the productivity, the happiness of the people who are being put in lockdown, all being sacrificed for the sake of this sort of unrealistic goal of 0 casualties.
So what's this goal then? You mentioned their goal. So what we hear in Australia is we want to get either to zero cases, or 80% vaccination. Now, I guess that the goalposts are going to switch with the 80% vaccination, because I was seeing one of these, I don't want to call them deadly, like these bureaucrats who you see, and there's not much, they speak a bit like these robots, and they said, look, we have to take into account that in Israel, people who had both doses, we see some scary stuff there. Therefore, the 80% vaccinated, we could have to maybe reconsider that. So that's the first thing, that I'm not convinced that when they say, when we reach X amount of vaccines, then that's it, and your sacrifices then will be back to normal. So that's the one thing. The second thing is this 0 cases. I don't understand what's the end game for that. So all scientists are saying, all serious scientists are saying that COVID is going to be around forever. And most people hopefully vaccinated, are going to catch COVID not once, many times in your life. And again, if you're vaccinated, it's going to be better for you. It's going to be not serious enough to worry you in terms of hospitalization and stuff. So the first thing I don't understand is, what's this point with zero COVID? What's the end game? And you mentioned the things that the unseen. So the unseen in both of these countries is their borders have been closed basically since March of 2020. We haven't seen this in history, except perhaps in North Korea or in these type of regimes, countries that close their borders. If you want to enter Australia, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel, and you might be allowed to enter the country. So it's not that you can enter and you have the option to enter to quarantine. You might even not be able to enter. Now, it's interesting also to see, again, this moving of the goalposts. So Sydney went into lockdown in around the end of June. And the idea was it's going to be a 2-week lockdown. A month later, the 2-week lockdown now was stricter, and it involved the army patrolling. We're talking about fines of around $3,000. So again, compared from where it started, in this country, the fine was something very small, and it went up and up and up. And also this idea that you can also move within 5 kilometers from your home. And if you've been a good boy and you got both your vaccines, you get 1 hour of exercise. And because you got vaccine, now you can have one more hour of recreation outside. So I don't know how much you can go out in prison, but this is the idea. Well done for getting vaccinated. You get an extra hour of going out. So, and here's the kind of stories that it makes you wonder, how is this not shocking people? So there was a guy, this story was in The Spectator. He had to fly from Belgium to Australia to say goodbye to his dying mother. Like, what can be, it's soul breaking, it's heartbreaking. So he gets the permit to enter the country, but he cannot land in Perth, where his mother was. He lands in Melbourne. So he goes for 2 weeks in the quarantine, and then he asks for a permit, allow me to go to Perth to say goodbye to my dying mother. This is declined. No, you cannot go, because in Australia, you cannot even go from one part of the country to another. And he had to say goodbye to his dying mother from a video call. And what does the local governor, I guess, said when this story was brought to him? Said, well, that's one of the issues when you live overseas. Is that someone who it gets to you that, yeah, these people they care about you? Like, I don't want to do this cheap emotionalism, but this is kind of creepy. This is kind of like the most sacred thing, which is you say goodbye to your dying mother. Now these people are so drunk in this idea that they have the right to do this and they have the authority to do this, that they say, well, tough luck, your mother is dying. Why did you have to live abroad? And the last story I'll bring to your attention, and then I'll ask for your comments. There was this story which I had to double and triple check because I didn't believe it. that they had to shoot 15 rescue dogs. 10 of these dogs were puppies. A city council in Australia decided that they would shoot and kill them, as they did, because not shooting them would mean that someone would have to go and take care of them. They were in a shelter or something, and going and take care of them would breach the local lockdown restrictions. So the city council, not one bureaucrat going rogue, the city council decided that what we need to do is we need to kill the dogs. And then this soul dead bureaucrat with his soul dead eyes, they said something like, we are investigating whether any animal cruelty law has been broken. So what's the way back from there? And again, are they seeing something that we don't? Like, are we missing something here?
Look, I would say that this could be a series of tragic errors on the part of bureaucracies all over the world, in particular here, if I didn't see similar standards across the leftist agenda. You see in the environmentalist movement, you see zero impacts as a goal, which is, of course, entirely unrealistic. In the dominant philosophy of the left, which is skepticism, you see omniscience as the goal, or permanent skepticism, or incapacity to know. It's either you're omniscient or you know nothing. And in this case, they're going for an equally unrealistic goal of zero cases. We know this disease is amongst us like the flu, except more severe for certain demographics. It's going to be with us forever. And we're probably going to have to get a series of boosters to try to protect ourselves from it, but it's unlikely that we're going to be entirely able to. So when you have unrealistic goals like this, it's no longer a mistake. It's an intentional action. It's not the intent, I think, of zero impacts, zero disease, and dominant skepticism is to destroy the morale of the individual, to break him down so that something else can control him for some other interests. I know that sounds massively conspiratorial, but what other possibility is open to an individual who can't think for himself, who can't act for himself without fear of doing damage to the community, and who needs overlords to make sure that the individual does not do damage to his community? This is just, to me, a concrete example, like environmentalism is, like the Green New Deal is, of one more way that side, the collectivists, are attempting to destroy individual life and meld it into a kind of collectivist utopia.
I have many things to say to that. I think you mentioned some very important points, particularly the one that says that everything you do is linked to your community. And I experienced this to the army, and it's very soul crushing. I mean, you can stand it for 9 months, but so the idea in the army is whatever you do, you have to take into account what's going to be the impact to everyone. And I understand that when you are literally in a war, it kind of makes sense. It's even selfish, I would say, to make sure that you act as a unit. But so, for example, in the army, we had collective punishments. And you get this all the time that, oh, this particular age group has been naughty. So now everyone has to go to lockdown. And you see it also with people. Now people are saying, because of you anti-vaxxers, we're going to go again into lockdown. Or because of young people who want to see their boyfriends and girlfriends and they didn't stay in the house, we had to enter another lockdown. So this is very sneaky. And as you said, it destroys this idea that I can have my own life. It's like, no, you haven't got your own life. Now we're all in this together. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, who is celebrated by every progressive in the West, she's a woman, she has very progressive views. So she came up with the term, we are a team of 5 million. And this has been her COVID, let's say, slogan. We are a team of 5 million. And explain me this. Okay, I'll give every benefit of the doubt. Could you explain to me how in Australia, for example, I can even understand, I don't accept, but I kind of get the idea that we're not going to allow anyone in the country. Okay, you want to become to have a jutse or how they call it in North Korea. Okay. What's the point of not allowing people out of the country? Go and check the travel ministry in Australia. You need a special permit to leave the country, not to leave and come back, to leave the country full stop.
Because you're not just a citizen of your country, you're a citizen of the world, of course, and you're responsible for the world, not just your own actions, the world.
I mean, it makes zero sense. First of all, see again how this is anti-science. The Delta variant is dominant throughout the world. Why are the borders closed? What are they afraid? That there's going to be the Delta variant is going to come to the country? It's already there. Anyway, more to say, but let's go to, we have some very generous super chats. So thank you, Luis. Thank you, Lucky Charms. Very, very generous. We have one from Australia. So let's see what our friend from Australia, Corey, says. A relative of mine had said that without the vaccination, we're not allowed to leave Australia. Not sure how accurate this is, but it wouldn't surprise me. Australians as a culture does not grab the necessity of freedom. And my friend, you know what's even weirder? Do you know who is the government in Australia? It's the centre-right party. It's a government that I remember that when they won the elections 2 years ago, free marketeers in the world were saying, hey, these are our guys. These are the good people. So yes, there is indeed controls on how you leave the country, not how you enter the country. And there have been people who have been stuck outside Australia for a long time and they haven't seen family for something like 2 years. And these are the things that put into question in my mind the idea that, do you really care about human beings? Because if you do care about human beings, at least you should say, I sense that what we're doing is tough, but hang in there. Here we say, no, we're the team of 5 million.
People who care about human beings do not imprison them. People who care about human beings liberate them, and they understand that liberating people is what makes for human progress across the board, even in fighting diseases and pandemics. So I can't say that these people care about human beings. They're certainly using that as a pretense to control others, but that's about it. So authoritarians have just become more clever in their use of altruism, and they've just become rhetorically slick, but they're no less vicious.
Let's concretize what you just said, Mark, that freedom actually liberates. Because someone could say, oh, these are just words. Here's how they're not. Do you know why Australia and New Zealand have so low vaccination rates? One of the reasons was that they had ordered the AstraZeneca and then said, oh no, because in I don't know how many thousand, there's this risk, no one is allowed to get AstraZeneca. So they got stuck only with Pfizer, and then that's why they're so late. So not only they tell you we're a team of 5 million, they're also telling you we are not even going to allow you to have a chance to get out of this, I don't want to call it prison, but whatever we want to call it. So A, they impose to you what we're going to do. B, you don't even have the opportunity to decide whether the calculated risk of 1 in I don't know how many thousand is an accepted risk for you to take that vaccine as opposed to the vaccine that the central planner decides. Now, here's the biggest mystery though. Do you know what is the estimation, for example, in New Zealand about the government's measure? 80% thinks that it's overall good. 59% thinks it's excellent. So I haven't got numbers for Australia, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're that high. And I'm not one of the people who believes that these are rigged polls. So how do you explain these numbers? How do you explain that the population is, that's
it's like Marxists who look at wealth as what your bank account is, as opposed to the many dimensions that make somebody wealthy. These people are looking at one narrow thing. Oh, we have 24 deaths or 64 deaths or whatever it is. This is a success, but it's no way for humans to live. You can't bind somebody up in bubble wrap and place them inside a contained environment and not let them move and claim that your policies are a success because the one thing that you've been focusing on you're seeing progress on. No, human life is a complex phenomenon, and human happiness is achieved by a complex phenomena of actions and thinking, and part of that is being independent and productive, living in the world and moving in the world. You can't, these people just see life as a metabolic activity, as breathing, as respiring in your bed is equally good to these folks as going out and writing a novel or giving a talk at a university that turns heads and changes minds. They have no concept of what makes people people.
And again, because I want to be fair, the New Zealanders would say, well, yeah, but because we closed the border and we had all these strict measures, between the lockdowns, life is almost normal. But here's the point. Now the principle is that whenever we have to, we close everything for indeterminate reason. So that's what I find the biggest issue. And that's why I'm saying the battle was lost last March in the first lockdown. When we were going out and we were clapping, that's when everything was determined. So that's when the rule became that, look, you don't have, so the rule is that there are things that you are allowed to do and everything else is based on you're not allowed, then we might allow you some more things. This is when everything was decided, unfortunately.
I think unfortunately, the majority of people believe that principles can be suspended in times of emergencies. So the idea of inviolable rights doesn't mean anything to them. They have a pragmatic interpretation of it, which is they're inviolable until they're not. And when are they not? When are they not inviolable? During an emergency, in which case we need to do what we have to do to survive.
And I remember this unforgettable moment where this person in the quote intellectual dark web wrote this tweet. Well, normally I'm a libertarian, but in times of emergency, anything goes. Give me lockdowns, whatever we have to do to stop this. So well done. This is
yeah. It's like saying I'm sorry, but no. Now you've just invalidated the I'm sorry with the but.
There's only one issue that I'm not sure I agree with some people in our sphere. I'm not even entirely sure if this is a conscious, let's say, power grab by the government, that someone has this plan. I mostly see this happening by default. So you will see, for example, the politician saying, we do whatever the science says. We follow the science and we have to protect lives. You see scientists saying, oh, we just give you the epidemiological data. And then you have people who say, oh, who am I to know? I can't know. I know I'm afraid. I haven't got the tools to understand because we've created this type of human beings who the idea that they can think is kind of too much of a burden. So you have this vicious circle with it. Well, there's no one in the center of this. And this thing is in a way reproducing itself. So we are getting into this deeper and deeper, let's say, loss of the idea of what is the government for, what are our rights. And there's not even someone driving it. It's like happening by default.
Yeah, in a way, I think that's true. There's no concerted conspiracy, but the people running the show do have a very specific ideology and fairly clear plans that they've been hatching for decades and decades. And now the opportunity has arisen to make these things happen. So I think what we have is a group of ideologically cemented folks who are opportunistic and taking advantage of the moment, and other people who are disarmed by the rhetoric and don't understand how to push back because they've been frankly disarmed for 80 years. The concept of individualism has been distilled out of America and replaced with collectivism. So it's not surprising to me that it's tending in this direction. And then there's the World Economic Forum, who you can't say is not conspiratorially attempting to take advantage of this, but it's still nonetheless fueled by their ideas.
And this is what quite often we objectively say. It comes with the ideas and then it's politics, and people are like, no, you're just, no, this is literally what happened. When all these years you've laid the ground with the idea that whatever works, pragmatism, we're all in this together, altruism. You can't be sure about anything. How do I know that the vaccines are not killing me? Or how do I know?
Skepticism.
Skepticism. So you see how these come together in a perfect storm. And this is why ideas matter. We don't say this because it's a party line. We say it because we see it in front of our eyes. Let's see a couple of more super chats. Corey from Australia. Okay, there's a super chat from Corey and from Ellie with very kind words. So thank you both. They say that they're glad that we mentioned these things. And Ellie mentions that this is going to look terrible in the history books. I've been thinking about this actually. How are we going to look back?
That depends on who writes the history books.
Exactly. It's where are we going to be in history? Are we going to be deeper in this altruist, skepticist, pragmatist thing? Because then our reading might be, why didn't we all do what New Zealand did? And why didn't we all have this North Korean kind of border control? And by the way, this is going to be the hill I'm going to die on, the border closures. I know people are saying, well, it's not such a big deal. For many people, it is a big deal. It is their life. It is their family. It is their values. It is that job that they want to go abroad and have. It is that person that they have this burn inside to go and see. You cannot tell what are the people's highest values. You cannot tell. Maybe for someone is to go and open their shop, but maybe for someone else is to go and see their beloved one. Maybe for someone else is to go in that job interview or in that conference that would open the doors for their careers. So by saying, well, okay, that's not a big thing. Like I see some liberals, even some liberal think tankers say, well, okay, we can all go with border closures. No, once you say we can all go with something, first of all, speak about yourself. Second, you've given up the idea that, again, that you have some rights in your life in yours. You basically said, yeah, do whatever you want with us, but please leave us the pub or leave us maybe a second hour to go out and exercise like in Australia. This is what pisses me more off. This idea that, okay, we can all agree with this, but let's draw the defense line a bit back. And now we're back against the wall and there's nowhere else to draw the defense line back.
Look, even with the Constitution that attempted to enumerate the powers of government and said outright, they have no more than these enumerated powers. Those powers have been overblown because people in government will find a way. And when they find a way to push those boundaries against your rights, those boundaries do not recede often without some kind of moral, philosophical, and or physical revolution.
So I hope people that we try to give a balanced approach. We tried not to be too emotional. So we gave you the data. We tried to explain what these people have in mind, but also to point out that for me, that's the biggest question. What's the end point? What's the goal? And
I think, I'm sorry, I think you steel-manned the argument very well. I just wanted to add, sort of in the Thomas Sowell vein, that the left, who is predominantly driving this narrative, never sees alternatives. They see a problem and they try to attack that. They don't see the alternatives that surround that problem. They just say, it's as if they're doing a form of moral intrinsicism. This thing is bad qua itself, and we have to attack it. And they don't see it in the context of all the facts that surround it. And that's why things become disastrous.
It's what Ayn Rand called the concrete boundness. And we've also seen it with great scientists. They say, look, as a doctor, I'm telling you that this is what you have to do epidemiologically. Now, in terms of social stuff, that's not my job. On one side, yeah, that's right. But also, it's not right because you have a mind to think. You cannot say, oh, this is only my angle. And of course, this is not on the doctors. This is first and foremost on the politicians who impose these rules. And I would say also to the people who don't even say, well, maybe there's something weird here that we need to discuss.
Yeah, guys, there's no such thing as an isolated fact.
There's nothing as an isolated fact, and there's no such thing as, well, now it's done. Because I also see now some liberals in the UK saying, why do you argue? Now the lockdown, now everything is in the past. Yeah, but it happened. And we are one bad variant away from happening again. So this idea that, oh, there are no more lockdowns, why are these people shouting and all that stuff? And last thing, by the way, I think it's very unfortunate for our side, the side fighting for individual rights and all that stuff, that people confuse that the crazy people who are anti-vaxxers, not out of, oh, I have this healthy skepticism, I've seen some data, but tribalistically anti-vaxxers. The fact that these people are now carrying the torch against the lockdowns, or the media portray them as carrying the torch against the lockdowns.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
It's, yeah, I think that's very unfortunate. So you see protests and the titles are anti-vaccine protests, which is not the case. Anyway, that's for another day. So as we said last week, nothing else is happening in terms of ARSC UK except from the Daily Objective this week because of Ocon. Tomorrow the show is gonna take place a bit earlier because otherwise there's a conflict between the Daily Objective and something which takes place in Ocon. So tomorrow we're going to discuss the importance of OPAR, of Objectives, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. It's the theme of Ocon, and we're going to give, let's say, a personal account. I think it's me and Jonathan on what this book meant for us, and also make a case on why it's worth reading it again. So tomorrow we begin 20 minutes earlier, 5:40 UK time. And we're going to finish obviously earlier. We're going to finish around 5:06, because then we need to jump. And most hopefully our audience jumps to, those of you who have the virtual pass, to Ocon. Right, that's all for today. Again, closing this bad parenthesis and going back to the what I call the objectivist nirvana of being part of this great community and of these great sessions. Keep an eye on ARI Global's accounts for beautiful highlights from Ocon. And next week, we're going to be back with all the usual stuff, the Harry Binswager discussions, the Yaron discussions, and everything else. Till then, see you tomorrow, 5:40, specifically for tomorrow, 5:40. And me and Mark are going to be on Clubhouse for a while to hear your takes. Maybe if you're in Australia, you can give us, or in New Zealand, an insider's insight. Mark, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nikos.
See you on Clubhouse.